take a little break if you want. No, one of the things that you do, very similar to me, is you, instead of having a sort of a single or a small set of focal point characters, you tend to let a number of different characters tell the story. I know why I do that, but I'd like to hear how that became your mode d'emploi.
Well, first of all, I chose a style of third-person limited omniscient. And what that means is you're not using the I voice, but you are more or less entirely within, potentially, one character's head. You're sitting on their shoulders, you can dip into their heads for thoughts, which then I would sort of present in an italicized version, monologues. So there could be actually no reliable narrator, because this is the third person, so they have their worldview, they see things the way they're going to see things, they're going to not see things, they're going to have belief systems, some of them are going to be correct, factual, some of them aren't. So in other words, every single character, and you can create 50 of these characters, and none of them are reliable. So what the reader has to do is start piecing together the shape of this world and the shape of the history and events that are going on. But with some kind of sense of, well, this may not be the case. I may have to, suspend or withhold judgment because I'm dealing with naive characters one after another. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it this way was, if you're going to create a world that's got a lot of detail, and it's not our world, you're bound to create, or you're bound to do a lot of world building. What world building requires quite often is exposition. Exposition is just descriptive stuff that is building up the background to the novel you're creating. But if you bury that exposition in third-person points of view, you're actually describing something that has no core. It's like you're slapping, with each character point of view, you're slapping clay on an invisible rock. And that clay is going to give the shape to the world, but you never see the world itself. So in that sense, that's why I wanted to do that, because I think it creates a verisimilitude and veracity in the world and authenticity, because each person is coming at it from their very specific point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two other reasons which I'm sure overlap with yours as well, because I think we've probably both been through this same kind of process thinking. Another one is obviously the fact that you can cover a great deal more ground with multiple focal point characters. You can see many more things. You can get a feeling, a larger feeling, because these are oftentimes the thing about epic fantasy. One of the things that seems to be appealing about it is they tend to deal with large events. Not necessarily a single event, but the kind of events that affect many, many people. So obviously the more you can show of the world, the more you can give people the feeling of the world. But more crucially for me was I also realized in a sense, and it was when I was first thinking about the difference between, people like me of my era and say Tolkien and others, is that the earlier tradition is, not just in epic fantasy by any means, but in our culture in general, or Western culture in general, is of information being handed down from above. And that there is that, as Stephen's talking about, that kind of, the reliable narrator, whether that be the Bible or your teacher or your government or whatever, that information is packaged up for you and given to you by a reliable source, and therefore the first thing you do is sort of accept the fact that someone else is telling you how things work. And I started to realize this with the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorns books, but when I was writing my first science fiction books, the Otherland books, it became even more clear to me, because I realized I don't want prophecies. This is supposed to be in the near future. I don't want prophecies. I don't want any of these devices that we use. I want to give these characters essentially a random handful of information that they pick up as they go, and that they then have to figure out what the actual shape of what they're dealing with, which is in fact very close to how we all process information all the time. Nobody, I don't think most of us here, before we vote in an election or make a decision about taking a new job, we don't go to one person. We don't go to a father confessor or something and say, what should I do? And we get that one answer. We put together as much as we can, and then we jump. We make the best choice we can. That's modernity. We don't tend to make decisions in a vertical way. We make them with a lot of horizontal input. Okay, I think at this point we might see if people are interested and have any questions, since we don't want to take all night. Well, we would happily, but yes.
Yeah, you mentioned other authors that kind of influenced you, Donaldson, and you left out Zelazny, but I'm sure he's there.
Zelazny's big for me too.
That kind of stuff that you then took in and processed. Can you talk a little bit about, and just to throw a couple of names out, like Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, the people that are now in the hierarchy below you, as it were, just time-wise? What are your thoughts on like the next wave, as it were?
Okay, you want to take first on?
I really don't know. I mean, it's impossible to predict. Like I said, I sense the trend going on in terms of the grim dark, as they call it now. But beyond that, it's surprising how successful I think epic fantasy is becoming yet again. I mean, it had its heyday in the 70s and early 80s, but it's back.
Yeah, that was in part, that was I think was a knock-on effect from the success of Tolkien, and Tolkien becoming almost like a cultural touchstone. I think what we're seeing now is essentially, in a sense, almost like, okay, so then all of the folks who were moved by fantasy and started writing in the 70s and 80s, now you've got the next generation coming along. And you mentioned Brandon Sanderson and Patrick Rothfuss, who are both very good. And I mean, the hopeful thing, the exciting thing is that there is always, but especially in a commercial genre, there is an evolutionary pressure to find new niches, to not simply keep doing the same things over and over again, but to find new ways. And the more people get involved, the more people who are writing fantasy because there's a big commercial demand. Yes, on the one hand, there will be a lot of not very good fantasy written, because that's what happens when things get popular. People will accept a lower threshold of good. But on the other hand, it also means that because of the pressure of all these people writing, you will have people trying to find their own niches, saying, well, God, there's 7,000, European medieval epic fantasies. Maybe it's time for me to write something about the Anasazi Indians that interested me when I was young, So I suspect in the long run, it will all be for the good. And certainly, there's a lot of really good young writers out there. I personally find it irritating. It's like, I would much rather that everybody that came after Stephen and I were just, total hacks and posers. But unfortunately, a lot of them are very, very good. Unfortunately for us, very good for readers. So, no, I think it will continue to thrive because, again, there's a difference between the commercial genre. The commercial genre will be popular or less popular depending on more on outside factors, like what's on TV, what's on film. Whereas the writers themselves are going to be largely people, I think, like Steve and I, who fall in love with something about the field and then find their own way to make it special. So I have pretty good feelings.